I was serving dinner in my own house when my daughter, Carla, shouted right in front of everyone, "My grandma smells like pee!" The entire table exploded with laughter. My son-in-law, Darren, applauded as if it were the funniest thing in the world. My grandchildren, 12-year-old Jaden and 10-year-old Mia, laughed so hard they almost choked on their food. I felt my face burn with shame, but I didn't say a word. I just finished serving, my hands trembling, and sat down in silence. At 67, I had become the punchline at my own table. After raising Carla by myself since she was 2, working double shifts to afford her private tutors and a comfortable life, I was now treated like a burden in the house I built with my own sweat. They thought I didn't notice the looks of contempt, the whispers when they believed I couldn't hear. "Grandma is getting annoying," Mia would say. "She complains about everything," Jaden would finish. Darren always agreed, nodding as if he were doing me a huge favor by tolerating me in my own home. That night, after everyone had gone to sleep, I stood alone in the kitchen, washing dishes and quietly talking to God. "Lord, what did I do to deserve this ingratitude? Did I sacrifice too much for them?" Tears fell into the soapy water, but something inside me was shifting. I was no longer the woman who accepted disrespect in silence. For years, they never questioned where the money came from for the bills, the groceries, or their trips. They never wanted to know about my savings, my investments, or what I truly owned. But what they didn't know was that everything was about to change. My name is Eleanor Jenkins, but everyone calls me Ellie. I am 67 years old, and for decades, I have been the invisible woman who holds this family together. Carla never had to worry about a thing because I was always there, solving problems, paying bills, sacrificing myself. When her father, Frank, left us, she was barely 2 years old. He left one morning taking only one suitcase and leaving behind debts that took me years to pay off. We never heard from him again. Carla was too small to understand that her world had collapsed, but I understood perfectly. I worked as a seamstress during the day and cleaned offices at night to save every dime. My girl never went without. I paid for her English classes, computer courses, and a private college degree in business administration. When she married Darren, I gave them $50,000 as a gift to start their life. When Jaden was born, they moved in with me into the house I had purchased years earlier. I cared for the baby for 2 years while Carla recovered. When Mia arrived, I did the same. I was always the woman who solved everything, supported everyone, and sacrificed for other people's dreams. During the last 5 years they lived with me, I became the unpaid housekeeper in my own house. I woke up at 5 in the morning to prepare breakfast, lay out the kids' school clothes, and cook dinner. Carla worked a part-time shift at a retail store, earning barely minimum wage, but she lived as if she were wealthy. Darren had been unemployed for the last 8 months since he was laid off from the accounting firm, but he pretended he was evaluating better offers. They spent money they didn't have on restaurants, designer clothes for the kids, and trips to the mall every weekend. And who paid for all of it? I did. Who covered the bills for my own house where they lived rent-free? I did. Who supported this family of 4? I did, with my retirement checks and the investments I accumulated over 40 years of hard work. Yet, they saw me as a burden, as something they needed to get rid of. Last week, I overheard Darren talking on the phone with his sister. "Ellie is becoming unbearable. She keeps questioning our spending, complaining about everything. We're thinking about convincing her to move into a retirement community. It would be better for everyone." My blood boiled when I heard that. It wasn't sadness. It was pure indignation, a rage that grew with every humiliation. But there are things they don't know about me, things they are about to discover very soon. Throughout all these years, while they lived their comfortable lives at my expense, I was very smart with my money. I worked for 40 years, first as a seamstress. Then I got a better job at a textile factory where I rose to be a supervisor. I never spent money on luxuries. I always saved and always invested. I bought this house when I was 30 and paid it off completely in 15 years. I have savings accounts, bank investments, a net worth they never bothered to learn about. The problem is that I got used to being generous. When Carla got married, when the grandchildren were born, whenever they needed help, I was always there with my money and my labor. But generosity turned into obligation, and obligation turned into contempt. Now they see me as an old, useless employee, like a bulky piece of furniture that needs to be moved out of the way. The night before last, after the humiliating dinner episode, something definitively broke inside me. I stayed awake late, thinking about every sacrifice I made, every time I kept quiet when they disrespected me, every moment I put their needs before my own. 45 years raising Carla alone. 10 years helping her with college tuition, 5 years supporting her, her husband, and their children. And now they repay me with mockery and schemes to get rid of me. This morning, I woke up different, not with sadness, but with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I got up, made my coffee, and sat down to run the numbers in my old notebook. I tallied my savings, my investments, the value of this house, everything I truly own. The figure made me smile for the first time in months. They have no idea what I really have, and they have no idea what I'm about to do. Carla left early for work as usual. Darren stayed home, job searching on the internet as usual. The children went to school, and I stayed there in my kitchen, planning my freedom. Because that is what I am going to do. I am going to free myself from this family that sees me as a burden. I am going to free myself from this life where I am neither respected nor valued. I am going to stop being the woman who gives everything and receives nothing in return. I called the bank and asked for an appointment with my account executive, Mr. Ryan, who has handled my accounts for over 10 years. I told him I needed to review all my investments because I was considering making some major changes. He gave me an appointment for the following Monday. I also called my cousin, Martha, the only family member who truly cares about me, and told her everything that was happening. She was furious and told me I could stay at her place for as long as I wanted. Then I called attorney David Lewis, my lawyer, and asked for an urgent appointment. I explained that I needed to update my will because my family situation had changed. He said he could see me on Tuesday. I also started searching online for small apartments to rent far away from here, in another neighborhood where I could start over. Because that is exactly what I'm going to do. I am going to start over. At 67, I am going to show them I am not the helpless old lady they think I am. I am going to teach them what it really means to lose someone who loves them. I am going to show them what life is like without the woman who always solved everything for them. For the rest of the week, I watched them with new eyes. Darren woke up late, ate the breakfast I prepared, sat at the computer pretending to look for work, ate the dinner I cooked, watched television, and went to bed. Carla arrived tired from the store, complained if dinner wasn't ready, scolded the kids for trivial things, showered, and went to sleep. The kids arrived from school, threw their backpacks everywhere, ate what I served them, did homework if they felt like it, played video games, and went to bed. None of them wondered how the house functioned, who paid the electricity, the gas, the water, the groceries, the school supplies, or the outings. For them, all of this appeared magically. The food cooked itself, the bills paid themselves, the clothes washed themselves, and at the center of all that magic was me, invisible, taken for granted, and undervalued. Friday night brought another disastrous family dinner. Carla was in a bad mood because the store had low sales, meaning less commission for her. Darren was frustrated because he hadn't found anything interesting in his job search. The children were restless because they wanted to go to the movies over the weekend, but Carla had told them there was no money. I served dinner in silence: stewed chicken, red rice, refried beans, freshly made cornbread, all prepared with my hands, my time, and my money. I sat in my usual spot at the end of the table and began to eat without a word. It was then that Jaden, my 12-year-old grandson, made a comment that was the final straw. "Grandma, why do you always eat in silence? You look like a ghost," he said, laughing. Mia laughed too. Carla smiled. Darren didn't even look up from his plate. In that moment, I understood that to them, I truly was a ghost, a presence they took for granted that didn't deserve consideration or respect. I finished eating, collected my plate, and went to my room without saying goodbye. I heard them continue laughing, probably about Jaden's comment. They didn't follow me. They didn't ask if I was okay. They didn't apologize. They simply carried on with their lives as if nothing had happened. That night, lying in bed, I made the final decision. I wouldn't wait any longer. I wouldn't tolerate any more humiliation. I wouldn't continue being the ghost in my own house. Monday, I would start executing my plan. Tuesday, I would be in the lawyer's office. By the weekend, they would know what it really meant to lose someone who loved them. I fell asleep that night with a strange feeling. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't anger. It was peace. The peace of knowing I was finally going to reclaim my dignity. The peace of knowing I wouldn't allow them to treat me like garbage anymore. The peace of knowing that very soon they would discover who truly held their world together. Saturday morning, I woke up early, as always. I prepared breakfast as always. I cleaned the house as always. But inside, I was no longer the same woman. Inside, my silent revolution had already begun, a revolution they couldn't even imagine. During breakfast, Carla casually mentioned that she had talked to her cousin Lisa about the possibility of me moving in with her. She says she has an extra room, and it would be nice for you to have company, she said, without looking me in the eye. We could talk to her next week. Darren nodded enthusiastically. That would be good for everyone. Ellie would have company her own age, and we could reorganize the house. This room could become an office for me. The children didn't even comment. For them, Grandma leaving was just another grown-up change that didn't directly affect them. I continued eating my toast and jam, saying nothing. But inside, I was smiling. They thought they were organizing my life. They didn't know I had already taken control of my own destiny. After breakfast, I went for a walk in the neighborhood, as I do every Saturday. But this time, my walk had a different purpose. I observed the houses, the streets, the people. I mentally said goodbye to this place where I had lived for so many years. Some memories were beautiful. Carla as a little girl running on these same sidewalks, buying ice cream on the corner, me walking her to her first day of school. But other memories were bitter, the nights I worked late to pay for this house, the times I sacrificed to give her the best, the moments she yelled at me as a teenager and I kept silent out of love. I returned home with a sense of closure. It was time to close this chapter of my life. It was time to open a new one, a chapter where I was the protagonist of my own story, not a secondary character in someone else's. Sunday afternoon, while everyone was watching a movie in the living room, I stayed in the kitchen, organizing important papers I would need to take with me. My birth certificate, social security card, investment statements, house deeds, and bank documents. Everything was in order. Everything was ready for my new life. Carla came into the kitchen to pour herself some water and saw me with all the papers spread out on the table. "What are you doing, Ma?" she asked with some curiosity. "Organizing some documents," I replied, giving it no importance. "What for?" "Just to keep them tidy. It never hurts." She shrugged and left. She wasn't really interested in what I was doing. She never had been. And very soon she would realize she should have cared a lot more. That night, before going to bed, I stood in front of the mirror in my room and looked at myself closely. I saw a 67-year-old woman with graying but well-kept hair, with wrinkles that spoke of years of work and worry, but also with eyes that shone with a determination I hadn't felt in decades. "Eleanor," I said to my own reflection, "tomorrow your new life begins. Tomorrow you stop being the woman who gives everything and receives humiliation. Tomorrow you become the woman who takes control of her destiny." I went to sleep that night knowing it was the last time I would sleep in this house as the housekeeper for my own family. The next time I slept here, if I ever did, it would be as the owner I truly am. Or better yet, maybe I would never sleep here again. Maybe my new life would be somewhere else, where I was treated with the respect I deserved. Monday arrived like every other Monday, but for me, it was the most important day of my life. It was the day my silent revenge began, a revenge that would not involve shouting or fighting, but simply the truth. The truth about who truly supported this family. The truth about what they were going to lose when I was no longer there. I woke up earlier than usual. I prepared breakfast as always and waited for everyone to leave. Carla to work, the kids to school. Darren stayed home as usual, but this time when he sat down at the computer, I dressed up to go out. "Where are you going?" he asked without much interest. "To the bank," I replied. "I have some things to sort out." He nodded absently and continued looking at the screen. He had no idea that I was going to the bank to put in motion the plan that would change his life forever. As I walked toward the bus stop, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Excitement for the future. For the first time in decades, I didn't know exactly what would happen, but I knew it would be better than what I had. I knew it would be a life where my worth was recognized, where my sacrifices were remembered, and where my dignity was respected. The first phase of my plan was about to begin, and they had no idea what was coming. The bus arrived. I got on and sat by the window. As I watched the streets of my neighborhood pass by, I mentally said goodbye to the woman I had been for so many years. The submissive woman, the sacrificial woman, the invisible woman. That woman was staying behind. The woman who arrived at the bank that morning was different. She was a woman with a plan, with resources, with determination. She was a woman no longer afraid to defend her own dignity. She was a woman ready to show the world, and especially her family, what she was truly made of. And best of all, they wouldn't see it coming. I arrived at the bank, a Bank of America branch, exactly at 9 o'clock in the morning. Mr. Ryan greeted me with his usual kind smile, but when I explained the situation, his expression changed completely. He listened carefully as I told him how my family treated me, how they took my money and labor for granted, and how they planned to get rid of me like an old piece of furniture. "Ms. Jenkins," he said, shaking his head sadly, "unfortunately, cases like yours are more common than you might imagine. Many senior citizens suffer this kind of financial and emotional abuse from their own families." His words confirmed that I wasn't crazy, that I wasn't exaggerating. What was happening to me had a name. Abuse. Ryan helped me review all my accounts. When he saw the numbers, he was impressed. "Ma'am, you have a considerable net worth. Your investments have grown very well all these years." He was right. Between my savings, my certificates of deposit, and the investments I had made over decades, I had nearly $200,000. Furthermore, my house was fully paid off and valued at least $300,000 more. "I want to protect my money," I told him firmly. "I want my family to stop having access to my resources." Ryan nodded and explained the procedures. We immediately canceled the automatic debit that Darren used to pay the house bills with my money. We also canceled the extra credit card Carla had been using for years. "As of today," he explained, "only you can move your money." But the most important step was when we decided to transfer a considerable portion of my investments to another bank, an institution where we opened a new account that only I would know about. "It's an additional measure of protection," Ryan explained. "That way, even if someone tried to pressure or manipulate you, your main resources will be safe." I left the bank feeling like a new woman. For the first time in years, I had made an important decision without consulting anyone, without asking permission, without first considering the needs of others. I had acted solely for my well-being and my future. While waiting for the bus back, I reflected on my life. I remembered when I was 20, working at the textile factory. I was a young woman, full of dreams, with a boyfriend who promised me the world. Frank was handsome, hard-working, and he made me laugh. When he proposed, I thought I had found my happily ever after. The first few years were good. Frank worked at a construction company. I was still at the factory. We saved money to buy this house. We planned our future. We dreamed of the children we would have. When Carla was born, I felt like the happiest woman in the world. She was a beautiful, quiet baby who slept and ate well. Frank adored her. He held her for hours and sang to her. But something changed when Carla turned 2. Frank started coming home late from work. sometimes smelling of alcohol. He said he had too much pressure, that work was hard, and he needed to unwind with the guys. I believed him. I comforted him, cooked his favorite meals, and tried to make our house his refuge. One night, he came home drunk and very agitated. He yelled that he felt trapped, that we were a burden to him, and that he hadn't signed up to be locked up for life. Carla was crying in her room because of the shouting, and I tried to calm him down. I told him we could talk the next day when he was calmer. The next day, Frank woke up very early, before Carla and I did. When I went downstairs to prepare breakfast, I found a note on the kitchen table. Eleanor, I need time to think. I don't know when I'll be back. Take good care of Carla. Frank. I waited a week, then 2, then a month. He never returned. He never called. He never sent money. He simply vanished from our lives as if he had never existed. He left behind some debts I had to pay and bitter memories that took me years to overcome. Suddenly, I was a single mother at 23, with a small child and a house I was still paying off. But I didn't let myself be defeated. I got a second job cleaning offices at night. On weekends, I sewed clothes to sell. Every dollar I earned, I invested in Carla or the house. Carla was a very intelligent girl, but also very demanding. She wanted the same things her classmates had: nice shoes, brand-name supplies, and elaborate birthday parties. I sacrificed to give her everything. I worked double shifts, skipped meals so she could eat better, and wore the same clothes for years so I could buy her new ones. When Carla turned 15, I organized a party that cost the equivalent of 3 months of my salary. I rented a hall, hired music, and had a beautiful dress made. She looked like a princess that night, and I felt like the proudest mother in the world. All her friends commented, "What an elegant party, what a beautiful dress, how lucky Carla is." But the next day, while we were collecting the gifts, Carla said something that hurt me deeply. "Mom, I wish I had had a dad for my party. All my friends danced the father-daughter dance with their dads, and I had to dance with you. It felt weird." I tried to explain that I had done the best I could, that her father had made the decision to leave, and that it wasn't either of our faults, but she kept insisting that our family was incomplete, that she was embarrassed to explain to people why she didn't have a dad. These comments motivated me to work even harder. I wanted to compensate for Frank's absence by being the best mother possible. I paid for private English classes for Carla, computer courses, anything that could give her an advantage in life. When it was time for college, she wanted to study business administration at a very expensive private school. "Mom," she told me, "all my friends are going to good colleges. I don't want to be left behind." I reviewed my savings and realized I would have to work extra shifts for 4 years to pay for her education, but I did it without complaint. I took on a third job on weekends, selling beauty products door to door. During those 4 years of college, I barely had a life of my own. I woke up at 5 in the morning, worked at the factory until 2 in the afternoon, came home to cook and clean. I left to clean offices from 6 to 10 at night, and on Saturdays and Sundays, I sold cosmetics, walking around the neighborhoods. Carla, meanwhile, lived like a typical student. She went to parties, hung out with friends, had boyfriends, and bought clothes with the money I gave her for expenses. She never offered to work part-time to help with her expenses. She never considered studying at a cheaper public university. She never wondered how I managed to pay for her lifestyle. When she graduated, we organized another party, smaller than the 15th birthday party, but equally expensive proportionally. Carla invited all her college classmates, some teachers, and the families of her friends. I worked for weeks preparing all the food, decorating the house, and making sure everything was perfect. In her thank you speech that night, Carla talked about her achievements, her future plans, and how proud she was to have graduated. She thanked some teachers, her friends, and her boyfriend at the time. At the end, almost as if she had forgotten, she added, "And thanks to my mom who supported me during college." She talked about my support as if it were something small, something casual, as if I hadn't sacrificed my health, my relationships, my free time, and my own dreams to make that moment possible. But I kept quiet, smiled, and continued serving the guests. Shortly after graduating, Carla started working at the retail store where she still works. She also started dating Darren, a young accountant she had met in college. Darren often came to the house, ate dinner with us, and stayed to watch movies. He was polite to me, but I always noticed a certain distance, as if I were the mother-in-law he had to tolerate. When Carla announced that they were getting married, I felt a lot of joy, but also a lot of fear. Joy because I saw my daughter happy, in love, and building her own family. Fear because I realized I would be left alone in this house after dedicating my entire life to caring for someone else. "Mom," Carla told me one day while we were planning the wedding, "Darren and I have been thinking, after we get married, we'd like to stay here with you for a while we save money for our own place. Is that okay?" Of course it was okay. The idea of not being alone greatly relieved me. Besides, Carla was still my baby, my only family. Having her close made me feel useful, needed. For the wedding, I pulled out all my savings again. I paid for the dress, the venue, the food, the music, and the flowers. Carla wanted an elegant, dignified wedding, as she put it. Darren didn't contribute much financially because he said he was just starting his career and needed to save money for his future. The wedding was beautiful. Carla looked radiant. Darren was very handsome in his suit. They danced their first song as husband and wife while I watched them from my table, feeling proud, but also nostalgic. My girl was no longer just mine. Now I had to share her with another man, with another family. After the honeymoon, Carla and Darren moved into my house temporarily. They brought some of their things and settled into Carla's old room. I rearranged my things to make space for them. I changed my routines to adapt to their schedules. I modified my habits so they would feel comfortable. At first, everything was fine. I cooked, they ate, I cleaned, they messed up. I paid the bills, they lived. It was like when Carla was a student, but now with Darren included. I felt useful again, necessary for my daughter's happiness. But when Carla became pregnant with Jaden, things began to change. The pregnancy made her very sensitive, very demanding. She wanted special meals at specific times. She couldn't stand certain smells. She needed the house to be completely silent when she wanted to rest. Darren worked full-time, so the entire responsibility of caring for pregnant Carla fell on me. I quit my night cleaning job to be available for Carla 24 hours a day. I stopped selling beauty products on weekends to accompany her to her doctor's appointments. My life was completely organized around her pregnancy, her needs, and her cravings. When Jaden was born, I became the full-time nanny. Carla had a difficult birth and needed rest. Darren had to work to support his new family. So I took care of the baby. I fed him, bathed him, looked after him when he cried at night, and took him to the doctor when he got sick. During Jaden's first 2 years of life, I was practically his primary mother. Carla recovered from the birth, but she had gotten used to me handling everything. When she went back to her part-time job, I continued to look after the child. When she came home tired, I had already fed the baby, bathed him, and put him to sleep. Jaden learned to say mama before grandma, but he practically saw me as his mother. I was the one who comforted him when he cried, fed him when he was hungry, and played with him when he was bored. Carla was more like an older sister who occasionally came to visit. When Mia was born 3 years later, the situation repeated exactly the same way. Carla had another difficult pregnancy, another complicated birth, and another long recovery, and once again, I became the main caregiver for the 2 children. By then, Carla and Darren's financial situation had not improved. Carla was still working part-time at the store, earning very little. Darren had changed jobs several times, always looking for better opportunities that never materialized. Their combined income barely covered their personal expenses, clothes, outings, and gas for the car Darren had bought on credit. I continued to pay all the house bills, electricity, water, gas, phone, cable, and internet. I bought all the food. I paid for all the children's clothes. All the medical, school, and entertainment expenses were on my dime, but they acted as if it were the most natural thing in the world. They never asked if I could afford to support 5 people on my retirement checks. They never offered to look for better-paying jobs to contribute more. They never considered moving out to their own place to ease my expenses. They simply assumed I would always be there, paying for everything, solving everything, and sacrificing for them, and I allowed it because I thought that was love. I believed that was what good mothers and good grandmothers did. I believed that my value as a person depended on how much I could give, how much I could sacrifice, and how much I could endure. But over these last few months, as they schemed to get rid of me, as they treated me like a burden, and as they mocked me at my own table, I realized that what I had believed was love was actually abuse. What I had believed was a united family was actually a parasitic relationship where I gave everything and they took everything. I returned home that afternoon feeling different. I wasn't the same woman who had left that morning. I was a woman who had taken control of her money, protected her net worth, and taken the first step toward her freedom. Darren was still at the computer when I walked in. "How was the bank?" he asked without much interest. "Fine," I replied. I sorted out some things I needed to take care of. He had no idea that the things I had sorted out included a new place to live, legal protection for my assets, and the first step toward my total independence. He had no idea he had just lost access to the money he had been spending freely for years. He had no idea that his comfortable life without responsibilities was about to end. That night, during dinner, I observed them with new eyes. Carla complained that sales at the store had been very low. Darren commented that he had seen some interesting job offers, but hadn't decided on any yet. The children talked about their classes, their friends, and the things they wanted for their upcoming birthdays. No one asked how my day had been. No one noticed I had dressed up as if for an important appointment. No one was interested in what I had done during the hours I was away from the house. To them, I was invisible, except when they needed something. After dinner, while I was washing the dishes, Carla approached me with a smile I now recognized as manipulative. "Mom," she said in a sugary voice, "I talked to my cousin Lisa today. She's very excited about the idea of you moving in with her. We could go visit next weekend so you can see her place and talk about the details." "What details?" I asked, not stopping my washing. "Well, how you're going to organize the expenses, the household responsibilities, those kinds of things. The expenses, of course. They wanted to get rid of me, but they wanted to make sure I kept paying for my own upkeep somewhere else. They wanted to be free of my presence, but not of my money." "Carla," I said, turning to look at her, "have you and Darren thought about how you're going to handle the bills for this house when I'm no longer here?" She fell silent for a moment, clearly surprised by the question. "Well," she stammered, "I guess we'll have to get organized. Darren is going to get a better job, and I could increase my hours at the store." "Do you have the better job already?" I asked Darren, who had been listening to our conversation from the living room. "I'm in the process," he replied with that familiar vagueness. "There are several very promising possibilities. Promising possibilities like the ones he had been evaluating for the last 8 months, like the ones that always appeared when someone questioned why he wasn't working, but that never materialized into real jobs. And the house bills?" I insisted. "Who's going to pay them while you get those better jobs?" Carla and Darren looked at each other uncomfortably. It was obvious they hadn't thought about those practical details. They had planned to get rid of me, but they hadn't planned how they were going to survive without me. "Well," Carla finally said, "I guess we could take out a loan until Darren gets a job." A loan? With what collateral? What income to repay it? What financial plan? But that didn't matter. The important thing was that I'd disappeared from their lives so they could continue living comfortably without having to see, hear, or tolerate me. I retreated to my room that night, smiling to myself. They thought they were getting rid of a problem. They didn't know they were getting rid of the solution to all their problems. And very soon they would find out the painful way. Tuesday morning, I woke up with an energy I hadn't felt in years. It was the day of my appointment with Attorney Lewis, and I knew that after that meeting there would be no turning back. I dressed with special care. I put on my navy blue dress, the one I had bought for Carla's graduation, and had since saved for special occasions. This was definitely a special occasion, the day I would take absolute control of my life. Carla left early for work as usual. The kids rushed off to school after eating the breakfast I prepared as usual. Darren settled in front of the computer with his coffee, pretending to look for work as usual. Everything seemed normal, routine, and predictable. They had no idea that their world was about to change forever. "I'm going out," I announced to Darren. "I have an appointment with the lawyer." He looked up from the screen with curiosity. "The lawyer? What do you need a lawyer for?" "To update some documents," I replied vaguely. "Things you have to do at my age." He nodded distractedly. His attention had already returned to the computer. He wasn't really interested in what I was going to do. He never had been. But today, his lack of curiosity worked in my favor. Attorney Lewis's office was downtown in an old but well-maintained building. I had known him for over 15 years. He was the one who had helped me with the paperwork for the house and some minor legal matters over the years. He was a serious, professional, but also understanding man. When I explained my situation, his expression became grave. "Ms. Jenkins," he said, after hearing the whole story, "what you are telling me is very concerning. Your family is financially abusing you, and from what I can see, psychologically as well." His words confirmed what I already knew in my heart. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't exaggerating. What was happening to me was real. It had a name, and it had legal solutions. "I want to protect myself," I told him firmly. "I want to make sure my net worth is secure, no matter what happens with my family." Attorney Lewis explained several options. We could create a new will where I specified exactly how I wanted my assets to be distributed. We could establish a trust to protect my property. We could draft documents declaring my full mental capacity to make decisions about my assets. He also told me, carefully, "We must consider the possibility that your family might try to declare you mentally incompetent to gain control of your assets. Unfortunately, it's a common tactic when seniors decide to protect their net worth." That possibility scared me, but it also motivated me to act faster. We decided to immediately draft a legal document where I declared my full mental capacity and my right to dispose of my assets as I saw fit. We also completely updated my will. "To whom do you want to leave your inheritance?" the lawyer asked me. That was the question I had been avoiding confronting. For years, I had automatically assumed everything would go to Carla and the children. But after the recent humiliations, after discovering their true feelings toward me, I was no longer sure. "I need time to think about it," I told him. "For now, I want the previous will to be canceled. I will make a new one when I have made my final decision." The lawyer nodded, understanding. "In the meantime, your assets will be protected. No one can make decisions about your net worth except you." I left the office feeling as if a huge weight had been lifted from my shoulders. For the first time in decades, I had absolute control over my life and my money. I was no longer the woman who gave everything without question, who sacrificed without limits, who accepted humiliation for love. My next stop was a real estate agency I had found online. I wanted to look at apartments to rent, places where I could start my new life away from the family that saw me as a burden. The agent, a young woman named Patricia, showed me several options. The first apartment was too small. The second was in a neighborhood I didn't like, but the third one was perfect. It was a 2-bedroom apartment in a quiet building, mainly inhabited by people my age. It had a functional kitchen, a comfortable living room, and a park with benches and trees visible from the window. "It's perfect," I told Patricia. "When could I move in?" "If you give me the deposit today, I could give you the keys tomorrow," she replied with a smile. Without hesitation, I took out my checkbook and paid her. 2 months deposit plus the first month's rent. It was a considerable amount, but I had the resources. For the first time in years, I was spending my money on something for me, just for me. "Do you need help with furniture?" Patricia asked me. "Yes," I replied. "I'm starting completely over." She gave me the name of a store that sold affordable but good quality furniture. I spent the rest of the afternoon choosing the essentials: a queen-sized bed, a simple dresser, a table with 2 chairs, a small refrigerator, and a basic stove. I didn't need luxuries, only functionality and comfort. The furniture would be delivered the next afternoon. By then, I would be settled into my new life. The excitement I felt was indescribable. It was as if I had been sleeping for years and was finally waking up. I returned home in the late afternoon. Darren was still at the computer, as if he hadn't moved all day. The children had arrived from school and were watching television in the living room. Everything was exactly the same as always. "How was your day?" Darren asked me absently. "Very good," I replied. "I sorted out everything I needed to sort out." He had no idea that what I had sorted out included a new place to live, legal protection for my assets, and the first step toward my total independence. That night, I prepared dinner as usual, but with a difference. I knew it was one of the last times I would do it for them. I made chicken with mole, rice, beans, and warm cornbread. A generous, tasty dinner, prepared with the usual care, but now I did it as a farewell, not as an obligation. During dinner, Carla casually commented on something that confirmed I had made the right decision. "Mom," she said while chewing, "I talked to my cousin Lisa again. She's really excited about you moving in with her. She says the financial help you'll be giving her will be very useful." There it was, the naked truth. They didn't want me to move in with Lisa for my company or my well-being. They wanted me to leave so they could have the house, but they also wanted to ensure I continued to be financially useful to someone else. "Financial help?" I asked, feigning ignorance. "Well, yes," Carla replied as if it were obvious. "Lisa isn't going to support you for free. You'll have to contribute to her household expenses, just like you contribute here." Contribute to the expenses? As if for the last 5 years, I had been the one contributing a share, not the one paying for absolutely everything. As if my money were an optional contribution, not the complete sustenance of this family. "And how are you going to manage the expenses when I'm no longer here?" I asked again. This time, it was Darren who replied. "We told you we're working on that. I'll get something good very soon." "When exactly?" I insisted. He became uncomfortable. "These things take time, Ellie. You can't rush the search for a good job." 8 months without working, and he was still talking about not rushing the search. 8 months living off my money, eating my food, using my utilities, and he still had the audacity to talk about taking his time. "And in the meantime," I continued to press. Carla and Darren looked at each other awkwardly again. It was obvious they expected me to continue supporting the house even after I left, or that somehow the money would continue to flow magically to cover their expenses. "Well," Carla finally said, "I guess we could take out a loan until Darren finds work." A loan. But that didn't matter. The important thing was that I disappeared from their lives so they could continue living comfortably without having to see, hear, or tolerate me. I retired to my room early that night. I had a lot to do. I opened my closet and started taking out the clothes I really needed. Not much. Some comfortable dresses, underwear, basic shoes, my favorite sweater. The rest could stay. In my new life, I didn't need so many things. I also separated my important documents, birth certificate, social security card, bank documents, insurance policies, house deeds, everything I would need for my independence. I stored them in a special bag that I kept hidden under my bed. Then I took out an old suitcase I had stored in the closet and started packing discreetly, only the essentials. I didn't want them to notice strange movements in the house. My plan was to leave very early before they woke up and leave everything arranged for when they found out. While packing, I found old photographs that made me reflect. Carla as a baby in my arms, smiling. Carla on her first day of school in her new uniform. Carla at her college graduation, proud with her diploma. Carla at her wedding, radiant in her white dress. In all those photos, I was there, holding, accompanying, celebrating, supporting, always present, always available, always giving. But in none of those photos was I the protagonist. I was always the secondary character in someone else's story. I decided to take only one photograph, one of me alone, taken a few years ago on my birthday. In that photo, I was genuinely smiling. I looked calm, at peace. It was the woman I wanted to be again, a woman who lived for herself, who valued herself, who found joy in her own existence. Near midnight, I heard that the whole family had already gone to bed. It was the perfect time for my last task of the night. I crept down to the kitchen and wrote a letter. Not a simple note, but a letter explaining my reasons, my feelings, and my decisions. Carla, Darren, Jaden, and Mia. For years I have lived for you, I have worked for you, I have sacrificed for you. I put your needs before my own. I thought that was love, but now I understand that I became an invisible person in my own home. Yesterday, I heard your plans to get rid of me like an old piece of furniture. You have treated me with contempt. You have mocked me. You have taken for granted that I would always be here to solve your problems and pay your bills. But you were wrong. I have decided to move out on my own, to a place where I can have the peace and respect I deserve. This house is mine, but you can stay in it for 1 more month so you can get organized. After that, you will have to find somewhere else to live. I will not continue paying the bills for this house. I will not continue supporting a family that sees me as a burden. I will not continue being the invisible woman who gives everything and receives humiliation. Darren, you have 1 month to get a real job and start supporting your family. Carla, you can increase your work hours or look for a better paying job. Jaden and Mia, you will learn what it means to have responsibilities and to value the people who love you. Perhaps one day you will understand the harm you caused me. Perhaps one day you will learn to value what you had. But by then, I will already be living the life I deserve, surrounded by people who respect and value me. Do not look for me. When you are ready to treat me with the respect I deserve, I will decide if I want to have contact with you again. With love, but without submission, Eleanor. I left the letter on the kitchen table, along with the extra house keys, and a detailed list of all the bills they would have to pay: electricity, water, gas, phone, cable, and internet. Starting next month, all of that would be their responsibility. I also left information about the pending payments they had: Darren's car payment, the children's school tuition, the medical insurance, the services they took for granted. For the first time in 5 years, they would have to face the reality of how much it truly cost to maintain their lifestyle. I went up to my room and finished packing. 1 suitcase with basic clothes, a bag with important documents, a small tote with some sentimental items. That was all I needed to start my new life. I went to bed that night with a mix of nervousness and excitement. Nervousness because I was about to do something I had never done: live completely alone for myself. Excitement because I was finally going to be free from the humiliations, the demands, and the invisibility. At 5 in the morning, I quietly got up, bathed, dressed, took my bags, and left the house where I had lived for decades. I didn't look back. I didn't feel nostalgic. I only felt liberated. The taxi I had called the night before was waiting for me on the corner. I gave the driver the address of my new apartment, and during the ride, I watched the city waking up, people leaving for work, children walking to school, merchants opening their businesses, everyone starting a new day, just as I was starting a new life. When we arrived at the building, Patricia was already waiting for me with the keys. "How exciting," she said with a sincere smile. "Your new life begins today." She was right. My new life began that day. A life where I was the protagonist, not the secondary character. A life where my needs mattered as much as everyone else's. A life where respect and love were not favors I had to earn with sacrifices, but rights I had simply for existing. I went up to my new apartment and stood in the empty living room, breathing deeply. The air smelled of new beginnings, infinite possibilities, and freedom. For the first time in decades, the future was completely mine. The furniture would arrive in the afternoon. In the meantime, I sat on the floor and took out my phone. I had some important calls to make. first to my cousin Martha to tell her I had finally taken the step, then to the bank to confirm that all the protections were in place, and then to Attorney Lewis to inform him that the plan was underway. But before making any calls, I stayed quiet for a few minutes, absorbing the magnitude of what I had done. At 67, I had found the courage to completely change my life. I had found the strength to say no more to a situation that was slowly destroying me. In a few hours, Carla, Darren, and the children would wake up and find my letter. They would realize that the invisible woman had finally decided to become visible, but in her own life, not theirs. They would discover that the person they took for granted had her own will, her own limits, and her own dignity. And I would be here, in my new home, starting the rest of my life, with the serenity of knowing that I had finally chosen to love myself as much as I had loved others throughout my life. It was 8 o'clock in the morning when Jaden rushed downstairs to have breakfast before school. As always, he expected to find the table set, the juice poured, and the warm quesadillas I prepared every morning. But the kitchen was empty, cold, and silent. There was no smell of fresh coffee, no cornbread on the griddle, and no activity. "Mom!" he shouted toward the stairs. "Grandma didn't make breakfast!" Carla came downstairs in her robe with messy hair, obviously annoyed at being woken up early. "What do you mean she didn't make breakfast?" she muttered as she entered the kitchen. It was then that she saw my letter on the table along with the keys and the list of bills. She picked it up with curiosity at first, but as she read, her expression completely changed. Her eyes widened, her mouth slightly opened, and her hands began to tremble. "Darren!" she screamed in a voice I had never heard from her. "Darren, get down here right now!" Darren ran downstairs, still in his pajamas, thinking there was an emergency. "What's wrong? Why are you shouting?" Carla handed him the letter without being able to speak. Darren read it in silence, and I could perfectly imagine his face of shock when he reached the part where I gave them 1 month to leave the house. "Where is your mother?" Darren asked after finishing the letter. Carla ran toward the stairs. "Mom! Mom!" She climbed the steps 2 at a time and opened the door to my room. She found the bed made, the closet half empty, and no trace of my presence. She returned to the kitchen completely pale. "She's gone," she muttered. "She took clothes, documents. She really left." Mia came downstairs at that moment, also looking for her breakfast. "Why are you shouting? Where is Grandma?" "Your grandma left," Carla told her in a trembling voice. "Left where?" Mia asked, not understanding the seriousness of the situation. "We don't know," Darren replied, beginning to process the implications of my departure. "She moved somewhere else." Jaden, who was older and understood things better, asked, "And who is going to make breakfast? Who is going to pay the bills?" That question dropped like a bomb in the kitchen. It was the first time anyone in that family had questioned who actually covered their basic expenses. Carla and Darren looked at each other, not knowing what to say. "We will," Carla finally said, but her voice didn't sound convincing at all. "With what money?" insisted Jaden, who at 12 was more practical than his parents wanted to acknowledge. Carla tried to call my cell phone, but I had changed the number the day before. Then she tried calling my acquaintances, the few friends she knew I had, but no one knew where I was. I had completely disappeared from their lives, just as they had planned to get rid of me. Meanwhile, I was in my new apartment, supervising the arrival of my furniture. The store employees were very kind. They arranged everything exactly as I wanted it: the bed in the master bedroom, the dresser against the wall, the table and chairs next to the kitchen window. For the first time in decades, I had a space entirely my own. No one else had expressed an opinion on the layout. No one had imposed their tastes. No one had made decisions for me. Every object was exactly where I wanted it to be. During the afternoon, I called my cousin Martha to tell her I had finally taken the step. "Eleanor!" she shouted excitedly. "I can't believe you did it! I'm so proud of you!" "It was easier than I thought," I told her sincerely. "The only difficult thing was making the decision. Once I made it, everything flowed naturally." "And how do you feel?" she asked. "Free," I replied without hesitation. I feel free for the first time in decades. Martha told me Carla had already called her, asking about me. I told her I didn't know anything, she explained, but she sounded desperate. I don't think she expected you to actually leave. That afternoon, I also received a call from the bank. It was Ryan, my account executive. "Ms. Jenkins," he said, "I wanted to inform you that there were several attempts to access your account this morning. Apparently someone had the details of your previous card and tried to make purchases, but everything was declined because we canceled that access." I laughed softly. Carla had tried to use the card to do the day's grocery shopping, as she had been doing for years. It must have been a terrible shock to discover that it no longer worked. "Also," Ryan continued, "someone called asking about you, wanting information about your accounts. Of course, we didn't give out any information, as it's confidential data. Darren had called the bank, probably thinking he could get information about my finances to find some way to access my money. How naive. That night, settled in my new bed, in my new room, I stayed awake, thinking about what must be happening in my old house. I imagined Carla and Darren awake late, running the numbers, trying to figure out how they were going to survive the next month. They were probably discovering for the first time how much it really cost to maintain the house. Gas, electricity, water, phone, cable, internet, groceries for 4 people, the children's expenses, everything they had taken for granted for years. Darren was probably calling all the companies where he had applied over the past few months, discovering that his promising possibilities weren't so promising after all. Carla was probably calculating whether she could increase her work hours, even if it meant earning barely a little more than minimum wage. 3 days later, Martha called me, laughing. "Cousin," she said, "you won't believe what happened. Carla came looking for me at my work. She arrived crying, begging me to tell her where you were." "Crying?" I asked, surprised. It had been years since I had seen Carla cry over anything other than a personal whim. "Yes, truly crying," she said. She told me they had to borrow money to buy food, that Darren had finally accepted a job at an auto parts store, but the salary was very low. She said they didn't know how they were going to pay all the bills. My first reaction was pity. After all, they were my family, and seeing them suffer caused me pain. But then I remembered all the humiliations, all the contempt, all the years they treated me like a domestic employee in my own house. "What did you tell her?" I asked Martha. "I told her I didn't know where you were, but that if they really wanted to find you, maybe they should reflect on how they had treated you all these years." A week later, I began to establish my new routine. I woke up when I wanted, without hurry. I ate breakfast peacefully while reading the newspaper. I went for walks in the park near my building. I met other ladies my age who also lived alone and had become independent. Mrs. Rosa was 70 and had divorced her husband after 40 years of marriage because he never respected her. Mrs. Carmen had left her son's house because her daughter-in-law treated her poorly. Mrs. Patricia had decided to sell her big house and move into an apartment after her children left the country without saying goodbye. We were all women who had made brave decisions to protect our dignity. We gathered in the park in the afternoons, talked, laughed, and shared our experiences. For the first time in years, I had real friends, not people who only tolerated me out of convenience. 2 weeks after my departure, Carla showed up at the park. She had found out where I lived, probably by following me from somewhere she had seen me. She looked different, thinner, with dark circles under her eyes and less maintained clothes than usual. She approached me from behind while I was talking with my new friends on a bench. "Mom," she said in a trembling voice. I turned to see her without showing surprise. "Carla, can we talk?" she asked. My friends immediately understood the situation and discreetly withdrew, leaving us alone. Carla sat next to me on the bench, but maintained her distance. She looked nervous, insecure, as if she didn't know where to start. "Mom," she finally began, "we need you to come home." "Why?" I asked calmly. "Because we need you," she said, but her voice didn't sound convincing. "Need me for what exactly?" I insisted. Carla fell silent for a moment. She obviously hadn't prepared for this conversation. She had come expecting me to immediately agree to return. "To help us," she finally murmured. "With what?" I kept asking, even though I already knew the answer. With the house bills, she finally admitted. Darren got a job, but he doesn't earn enough to cover everything. There was the truth. They didn't need me as a mother, as a grandmother, as a person. They needed me as a source of income, as the invisible employee who solved their financial problems. Carla, I said in a serene voice, for years you treated me as if I were a burden. You mocked me, you humiliated me, you planned to get rid of me. Now that you've discovered I was the one maintaining your lifestyle, you want me to come back. That's not true, she protested weakly. Isn't it? I asked her. Then why are you looking for me? Why do you miss me? Because you value my company? Because you want to spend time with me? Carla couldn't answer because we both knew the answer was no. I forgive you, Carla, I said after a long silence. I forgive you because you are my daughter, and I will always love you. But forgiving does not mean I will return to a situation where I am not respected. I promise everything will be different, she pleaded. We'll treat you better. We'll value you more. Until when? I asked her. Until you get used to having me there again? Until you take me for granted again? Until you find another way to get rid of me? Carla began to cry. Real tears, not the manipulative crying she had used since childhood to get what she wanted. I don't know what to do, Mom, she said between sobs. I didn't know maintaining a house was so expensive. I didn't know we depended on you so much. I thought you were just there. Those words perfectly summarized how they had seen me for years, not as a person with needs, feelings, and dignity of her own, but as something that was simply there, available, and taken for granted. Carla, I said, putting my hand on hers, you are an adult woman with a husband and children. It's time for you to learn to live without depending on your mother for everything. But we don't know how, she admitted. Then learn, I replied firmly. Just like I learned to be a single mother at 23, just like I learned to work 3 jobs to support you, just like I learned to sacrifice my dreams for yours. Carla remained silent, processing what I was saying. For years, I continued, I believed that my worth as a person depended on how much I could give, on how much I could sacrifice. But now I understand that a valuable person also deserves to receive respect, love, and consideration. We respect you, Carla murmured. Do you really? I asked. When you mocked me at dinner? When you planned to send me to live with Lisa to get rid of me? When you never consulted me about decisions that affected my own house? Carla couldn't answer because she knew I was right. Mom, she finally said, what do we have to do for you to come back? Nothing, I replied. There's nothing you can do because I no longer want to return. For the first time in my life, I am living for myself, and it feels wonderful. Carla stayed with me for another hour, trying to convince me with different arguments that the children missed me, that Darren had learned his lesson, that she understood my worth. But all her words sounded empty because we both knew they only needed me for my money. When she left, she looked defeated. I think she had finally understood that the consequences of their actions were permanent, that some decisions cannot be undone with apologies. That night, I called Attorney Lewis to inform him about the meeting with Carla. Ms. Jenkins, he said, it's important that you stick to your decision. Your family needs to learn to live with the consequences of their actions. If you return now, they will understand that they can treat you badly because you will always come back. He was right. Going back now would send the message that they could humiliate me, disregard me, scheme to get rid of me, and then simply ask me to return when they needed me. 1 month later, exactly as I had specified in my letter, I changed the locks on the house. It was my legal property, and I had already given them enough time to get organized. I hired a locksmith and personally went to supervise the work. When Carla arrived from work that afternoon and couldn't get in, she called me desperately on the new number she had gotten through Martha. Mom, you changed the locks. We can't get into the house. The month I gave you is up, I replied calmly. It was time for you to find your own place. "But we haven't found anything we can afford," she cried. "Then look for something smaller, cheaper, in a less expensive neighborhood," I suggested, just like any family that has to live within its own means. "The children will have to change schools," she protested. "The children will learn that luxuries are earned through work and maintained with responsibility," I replied. Carla continued pleading, but I had already made my decision. They had had a full month to get organized, look for alternatives, and learn to live within their real possibilities. If they hadn't done it, it was because they were still hoping I would solve their problems. 3 months later, Martha told me that Carla, Darren, and the children had moved into a small apartment in a less expensive area. Darren was working full-time at the auto parts store, and Carla had increased her hours at the retail store. The children had changed schools and were learning to live with fewer luxuries. "Do you know what the most interesting thing is?" Martha told me. "Carla told me the kids are closer now, that they're learning to help out around the house because they don't have a housekeeper. She also said that she and Darren are closer because they have to work together to get by." It was ironic. My departure, which they had seen as a tragedy, was turning my family into what they should have always been, responsible people who relied on themselves. 6 months after my departure, I received a letter from Jaden, my grandson. It was handwritten in his 12-year-old boy's handwriting. "Dear Grandma Eleanor, I really miss your quesadillas and your bedtime stories. Mom explained to me why you left, and I think I understand. We didn't treat you well, and that was wrong. Now I help more around the house, and I've learned to do some things myself. Dad says these experiences are making us stronger. I hope you're happy in your new house. I love you, Jaden." That letter made me cry, but not from sadness. I cried with pride because my grandson was learning important lessons about respect, responsibility, and consequences. I cried with joy because finally someone in that family understood that my feelings mattered. I wrote him a reply, telling him about my new life, my new friends, and the beautiful things I had discovered living alone. I also explained that moving away from people who hurt us doesn't mean we stop loving them, but that we love ourselves enough to protect ourselves. It was a year before I saw Carla again. We ran into each other by chance at the grocery store, and I was surprised to see how much she had changed. She looked more mature, more responsible, and less spoiled. Her hands had calluses from working more hours, but she also looked more self-assured. "Mom," she said when she saw me, "you look great." "Thank you," I replied. "You look different too." We talked for a few minutes. She told me Darren had gotten a better job at an accounting firm, that she had been promoted at the store and now earned a little more. The children were well adjusted to their new school and had learned to be more independent. "Are you happy?" she asked me at the end. "Very happy," I replied sincerely. "For the first time in decades, I am completely happy." Carla nodded sadly. "I'm happy for you," she said, and I could see that she meant it. We said goodbye cordially, without resentment but also without making plans to see each other again. I had lost the daughter who needed me as an employee, but maybe one day I would find the daughter who respected me as a mother. As I returned to my apartment that afternoon, I reflected on the year that had passed. I had recovered my dignity, my independence, and my joy for living. I had learned that it is never too late to demand the respect we deserve. I had discovered that a life lived for oneself can be as fulfilling as a life lived for others. And most importantly, I had taught my family that actions have consequences, that love does not justify abuse, and that some decisions change life forever. 2 years after leaving my old life, I wake up every morning in my apartment with a sense of peace I had never experienced. The sun comes through my window at the time I want it to, not when the needs of others force me to get up. I prepare my coffee calmly, without haste, savoring every sip as I watch the park from my kitchen. My morning routine has become a sacred ritual of freedom. I water my plants on the windowsill, small succulents I bought because I liked them, not because they were useful to others. I read the entire newspaper, something I could never do when my time belonged to my family's needs. I bathe peacefully, get dressed for myself, and wear clothes that make me feel comfortable and pretty. I spend the afternoons with my friends from the park. Mrs. Rosa, Mrs. Carmen, Mrs. Patricia, and I have become inseparable. We share stories, laugh at things that only women our age understand, and give each other advice about plants, recipes, and occasionally about our complicated families. They understand my decision because they have all gone through similar situations. On weekends, I visit my cousin Martha or go out alone to explore the city. I have rediscovered places I had forgotten existed. Small bookstores where I can spend hours, craft markets where I chat with vendors, and squares where I sit on a bench to watch people pass by. Everything at my own pace, according to my own desires. 3 months ago, I received another letter from Jaden, now 14. He told me he had gotten his first part-time job helping at a bakery on weekends. "Now I understand why you worked so hard to support us," he wrote. "It's tiring, but I feel proud when Dad tells me I'm responsible." His words filled me with pride. My grandson was learning the value of work and responsibility. Mia also wrote to me for the first time last month. At 12, her handwriting is neater than her brother's, but her words were just as significant. "Grandma, Mom taught me how to make quesadillas like the ones you used to make. They don't taste as good, but when I eat them, I remember you. Now I help more around the house, and I understand that caring for a family is everyone's job." These letters are kept in my special wooden box, along with some photographs I rescued and important documents, not out of resentment, but because they represent my family's transformation. They are proof that my decision, though painful, was correct. My grandchildren are growing up with values they would never have learned if I had continued solving everything for them. Last week, while buying vegetables at the farmer's market, I ran into an old neighbor from my previous house. She told me she had seen Carla and Darren, that they looked hardworking, and that the children had grown a lot and seemed more mature. "You can tell they've learned to value what they have," she told me. "They don't live with so many luxuries anymore, but they look more united as a family." Those words confirmed something I already knew in my heart. My departure had been a gift disguised as punishment. By refusing to continue being their easy solution, I forced them to find their own resources, to grow, to mature, and to become a real family instead of a collection of dependent people. I have learned to cook for one person, something I had never done. My portions are small. My tastes are my own. My time in the kitchen is for meditation, not obligation. When I feel like making something special, I do it because it brings me pleasure, not because someone expects it from me. In the evenings, before going to sleep, I sit in my favorite armchair, one I chose myself, which is perfect for my back and my height, and reflect on my day. There are no demanding voices, no complaints about the food, no plans of others interrupting my thoughts. There is only silence. The silence I chose, the silence that gave me back my peace. Sometimes I think about the future. I don't know if Carla and I will ever have a close relationship again. I don't know if my grandchildren will want to visit me when they are older. I don't know if Darren will ever truly understand the harm he caused me with his indifference. But I have learned something fundamental. My happiness cannot depend on the decisions of others. Next month, I will turn 70. I am planning a small celebration with my friends from the park. It will be the first time in decades that I celebrate my birthday thinking about what I want, not what others expect of me. Martha asked me if I would invite Carla, and the answer was no, not out of resentment, but because that day I want to be surrounded only by people who celebrate my existence, not who tolerate it. I have visited the notary again to finalize my will. I decided to leave the house to an organization that helps older women in situations of domestic abuse. My savings will go to an educational fund for children from working-class families. Carla will receive something, but not everything. My grandchildren will receive their inheritance when they turn 25, an age old enough to value what they receive. This decision was not made out of revenge, but out of consistency. Throughout my life, I gave without limits, and that excessive generosity created dependent people who didn't know how to value what they received. My final act of generosity will be to teach that everything is earned, that nothing is taken for granted, and that respect and love are prerequisites for receiving the fruits of a life of work. Some afternoons, when the sun sets behind the trees in the park, I feel a gentle nostalgia for the good moments I had with my family. Carla's first years, when she was a sweet and grateful child, the first days of my grandchildren when their smiles lit up my life. But that nostalgia is no longer accompanied by guilt or regret. I have learned that loving does not mean allowing yourself to be hurt. I have learned that being a mother or a grandmother does not mean sacrificing all personal dignity. I have learned that it is never too late to demand the respect we deserve. My apartment is small, but it is filled with my presence. Every object has a story I chose. Every piece of furniture is where I wanted to put it. Every day unfolds according to my wishes and needs. For the first time in my life, I am the protagonist of my own story. When I look in the mirror now, I see a woman who learned to value herself. I see wrinkles that speak of experience, not suffering. I see eyes that shine with the serenity of someone who made the right decisions, even when they were difficult. Sometimes the greatest lesson you can teach the people you love is that you don't need them to survive, and in that silence, I found my own voice. Did you like my story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story with love and respect.